Well, welcome back to another session. I hope you were well. Today I will be continuing from a series of conversations that I started a while back, which had to do with the burden of performance on men. And connected to this burden is the strife, the pursuit, the ambition, uh, and the travel towards success. And the sessions I covered uh, in the weeks prior, I began by trying to apply a principle that I call inversion. And generally, people understand this principle. It simply works as follows. One of the best ways, if you have a problem to solve, is to invert what you're looking at, to find an alternative way to solve the problem, but most importantly, to identify what could be stopping you from understanding the problem as clearly as you should. So, for example, if I wanted to make the United Kingdom great, a great nation, if I inverted that position, which is how do I make the United Kingdom great, the inversion would be how do I destroy the United Kingdom? Now, I will come up with a list of things I could do. You might say kinetic war. You might say some form of economic war. You might say some form of maybe technological warfare, or something else. It could also be a warfare of ideology. But there will be several ways that I can come up with ideas and strategies to destroy the United Kingdom. If I inverted all of what I have identified and I did the opposite, then I will ipso facto make the United Kingdom much stronger, much safer, and possibly great. So inversion was something I started the session with, and the idea was a simple one. Think about yourself as an athlete running a hurdle race. You have a distance, but you have obstacles. If there were no obstacles, the race will be completed much faster, much smoother, and here's the key point, with less likelihood of injuries or you failing to reach your mark. Life is a series of hurdles. We have obstacles in our way. We have to go under, over, around, but in this particular race, we have to go over. So, in running a hurdle race, you sprint, you adjust your speed as you approach the obstacle, timing, precision, and lift. You scale the obstacle, recognizing you have to scale the obstacle properly. You land, and you continue running. And so I started the sessions, about 4 of them, identifying something that I call the 7 deadly sins. The position was a simple one. If you could avoid some of those obstacles, which I labeled as the 7 deadly sins, then automatically it means the likelihood of being hindered from your success, which can be yours, is minimized. Today's session, I will be talking about envy. Envy. Envy, jealousy is 2 words that are used synonymously. They're not the same. But in any case, I'm speaking specifically about envy. I'll make this a short session as I get myself back into teaching, considering I was away for an entire week. Envy is a powerful emotion. It's a powerful feeling. It's a powerful motivation. It's a powerful drive. But, and here's the big but, it's not a pure emotion that can sustain you. It's not self-sustaining. It's self-destructive. Most people's success are fueled by envy, jealousy. Let me say that again, just for to make things stick. Most people's success, the success that most people have attained and have achieved. Now, for yourself, possibly the success and the motivation driving you could be fueled from a place that is not pure. It's not built on good ground. Envy makes the world go around because we look to the opposite side of the fence and we see something that we like that belongs to another. And we're motivated based on our desires to strive to get what they have, not taking into account that what they have may have been tailored for them, and we should take that desire we have for more and make sure it's aligned in a pure state of vibration, in a positive state, but make sure that it's tailored for us. But when we look across the fence and we see something someone has and we're motivated to have what they have, not what we want or what is right for us, but what they have, then that motivation is negative. It's not pure. I have, over my life, come across so many people, great people. I've come across people who, though great, are content with what they have. And they do not seem to have a desire to covet, to take what belongs to another, even by desire or in their imagination. They're quite happy with having what is theirs come to them. I've also met people who cannot stop themselves from keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the next trend, the next person. And in many ways, if you were to look at our society today, especially the younger ones, what you find is that the motivation across young people these days is driven by envy. We have an insatiable appetite for more, but that more is not coming from an inner place of spirit. It's not coming from the part of us that is looking for fuller expression and purity in that expression. It comes from a place of envy. We want something someone else has. We turn on the mobile phones and we see other people leading lives that we never desired. We may have had an appetite for it, but never desired. And suddenly we have a desire. And our desire can become so strong that we would be quite happy for us to have what they have and they lose what they have. Let me start today's session by saying as follows. Envy never begins from a place of an object. I'll say that again. Envy is a very subtle emotion. It's also a very subtle motivation. It masks itself as ambition, but it's not the same as ambition. Envy begins not from what people think, as referring to a desire for an object. It doesn't begin with an object. As a matter of fact, envy begins with a level of resentment. In its very core, the essence is bitterness, a frustration, a waving at your hands at the heavens. For example, you meet someone who perhaps you've known all of your life. They are not as smart as you. They are not as good looking as you. They are not as kind and courteous as you, in your opinion. But yet, they've achieved something that far exceeds where you are. And suddenly you cannot understand how you work harder. You're better looking. You're more intelligent. You're more educated. You're more industrious. You've been looking for opportunities. You've played the cards right. You've maintained a certain level of character. But they have gone about life in a manner that does not meet, let's say, your checklist of qualities and lifestyles. But they have something tangible to show the world that says they are successful. So often, envy doesn't start with you wanting the car that they have, the wife that they have. It doesn't begin with you wanting the children that they have. It could also sometimes start from a place of resentment, of anger towards the heavens, of anger towards the gods, a feeling that you've been denied of something that should have been yours, a feeling that good things always escape good people, and for some reason the bad people tend to have it all. Now this is why I started by saying that envy is a very, very subtle emotion, but it's not pure. Here's the reason. Those who have envy and envy jealousy come from a place of a lack of abundance. They do not believe in the abundance mindset. They believe in a limited, fixed, zero-sum mindset. That if one person has something, it precludes you from having the opportunity to have some of that as well. There are others who have a positive sum mindset. People who feel that the universe is forever forgiving, giving, creating, and that if a desire comes and you want that desire, that whatever you want will be created. Which is why those who live in an abundant place do not have envy, because they understand that they can simply ask and they expect to receive. Those who have envy lack an inner level of confidence that whatever they ask for, it will be given. So what you tend to find is, let me use examples, because we are talking about success. And it would be remiss of me not to make it clear that success can come in various forms. It could be relationships, it could be business or professionally, it could be in your self-development or personal growth and development, it could be in your health and wellness, it could just be perhaps in your social life, having social capital, it could be financial success. Irrespective of which branch of success that I or you are looking at, envy, jealousy applies everywhere. I'm speaking to men, but let me deviate. Women can be envious of other women. For example, you want to have a family and a loved one and have a relationship that is of some emotionally profound, significant level with someone you like, admire, respect, honor, and hopefully love. And you've done everything the right way. You haven't been like other girls giving themselves away to random men. You've kept yourself, you've maintained your chastity and your purity. But for some reason, all of the people you know, friends or acquaintances, people in your community, who did the opposite of you, seem to have got married, had children, and have a family. And here you are, unmarried, no family, and you're thinking to yourself, why me? There's the feeling where the next news you hear about someone else has had a baby, it creates a feeling of frustration and sadness, bitterness in you. It means you're envious, because it means you believe that, assuming that there is something out there that gives to all mortals, that there is only one quantity, and if it's gone to that person, then it cannot come to you, that it's limited in its scope. And that is for women. Men, we do the same thing. We see someone with for example, a job title. It could be a work email. You've now seen someone has been promoted. Someone has bought a new car. Someone has started looking much better physically in terms of aesthetics. And you have an envious spirit, a spirit that says, why him and why not me? That's the key word. Whenever you feel that you have a sense where you're not at the point where you hear some positive or good news about someone, if the first feeling is not fantastic for them, if the feeling you have is, I wish it were me, or why not me, or when will it be mine, or how long can I wait, or here we go again, or they don't deserve it, or I wish they didn't have that, or, to put it in a better, milder way, let's see how long it lasts. It means you have an envious spirit. Let me say something to you as I try to bring today's session to a place that I think might be useful. When I say a place of memory, Apologies, I just had a slight distraction, just trying to address a few things. Um, I'm going to use some examples to give you examples of people that I think the stories may resonate with a few. I hope it resonates with everyone, even if you don't actually have an idea about the archetypes or the story behind each archetype. I hope it rings a bell. I'll try not to go into detail. I tend to lean towards stories from the books of antiquities, and because these are profound stories, and you can draw archetypes and explain life using some of these stories. And I'll do that just before in a short while. But let me say something that I think is important, and I think is key. As men, it's important that we understand that we are generally success objects. Women are generally, you might say, sex objects. Now, there are derivatives of those two. Men are success objects, but we are also resource objects. We are also disposable objects for the purpose of protection and security and safety. Women are sexual objects or sex objects, but they're also inspirational objects. They're also objects that provide the means by which our genes and our lineage continues to thrive. The reason I say that is because if you, as a man, can stop and think from the position of I am a success object, it means that if you're not careful, most of your life in pursuing success, you are looking for things on the outside of you to affirm something that is missing. For example, across all religions, if you study theology, there is one place where there is a unified agreement, irrespective of the time frame. That universal agreement is that we're all seeking for that I. You might say that transcendental, that divine, or that self. Each religion connects in one thing, which is the power of belief. That whatever you believe and whatever you expect, in many ways it has a way of manifesting itself. A word I don't really like, manifest, primarily because we use it without action and activities. But whatever we believe, we bring into life. And if you see yourself as a success object, then it means that success is not something outside of yourself. That success is actually built into your DNA. And that as a man or as a woman, what you should look to do is not to seek or to become successful, but is to become someone who has value and be a person of value and to serve other people with the gifts that you have. Think about it this way. Think about an apple tree. An apple tree is successful. Why? If it produces apple. At the point it produces apple, as you walk across the road, you see the apple tree, you walk up to the apple tree and you take a piece or take one apple. You are drawn to the apple, not necessarily the apple tree. The tree has gifts, the ability to produce apples. Therefore, it is successful, with or without your desire for apples. But it will go through seasons, and some seasons it will produce, and some seasons it will have to recoup. An apple tree is successful, irrespective of how you feel about the tree. You walk past during the harvesting season and you see apples, and you feel happy, and you say, that's a great tree. And you walk past on a different season and it has nothing, and you say, what a useless tree. Your expectations and your perspectives and your opinions does not change the success in that tree. The tree is built with success within. Now you as a man and you as a person, you have success within. You don't look to seek or find success outside. You allow the success in you to come forward. Now here is the key part of today's session. Most young people, most people these days have an intrinsic relationship between their identity and something external. So people connect their success to something outside of them. And I'm going to share something that I think, if you can remember one thing from today's session, it is as follows. Whenever you identify or connect your identity with something on the outside, recognizing that the one constant we have in life and that we are promised, change. When it comes, when the external changes, you will find you will always have a crisis of identity. And it will make you question who you are, what you stand for, and it might push you towards a negative emotion, envy, jealousy, which will cause you to take a pathway of least resistance, a desire to re-achieve or reclaim what you believe you lost, which you haven't lost. It could just be a seasonal time. Like the apple tree, you go through seasons. You would be led down the path which is expedient, but to your downfall, simply because you connected your identity with something external, and change came, which is a constant, and therefore you've been pushed away from the place of the prince and moved into the place of a peasant, and therefore you're acting in a manner that is not consistent with your ultimate self-identity, which is success, which is completeness, which is integrity. Now, this is key, because as I journey around the United Kingdom, and as I travel, I am very surprised, and I'm also delighted to see that there is a longing for success amongst young men. I am disappointed, however, because I see that the motivation is the wrong motivation. Many are motivated by jealousy, and many are motivated by envy, and many are motivated by looking to the other person out there and wanting the life that the other person has, without recognizing that we are supposed to carry each of our crosses, and our cross will be different because our calling is different from the next person and our purpose is different. So here is a question for you as I go through some of the archetypes and examples, so you can see that envy, jealousy is not something you should feel ashamed for. This has been with us since time immemorial. As a matter of fact, it's so deeply rooted in our consciousness that what we are advised to do is to master the emotion and master that desire and suppress the desire when it comes and keep our eyes on the prize, which is purity of self. I'm going to use stories that perhaps are connected with about 3 religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Torah, the Pentateuch, the Holy Bible, and the Quran have similarity in stories, some subtle adjustments in some 1 or 2. But when we start from the beginning, and we'll talk about the Garden of Eden, here's a simple part of the story to keep in mind. Now, whether you believe in the story or whether you fully understand the story, I think you would align with what I'm about to share in the 5 examples that I will give. The temptation, or the so-called temptation, offered to Adam and Eve in the garden was a simple one. There's a fruit in the garden, in the middle of the garden. You've been asked and you've been offered the opportunity to have any of the fruits in the garden, but and bar one. And the temptation is presented as follows. The reason you've been told not to eat of that fruit is because when you eat of that fruit, you will become like God, recognizing good from evil and having wisdom. Now, the reason I'm using these examples is so you can understand that we, and all of us, have inbuilt into our psyche the desire for greatness, the desire to be successful, and the desire for more. All of those, there is nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is the motivation, the emotion. That is a fruit in the garden. The only reason you've been asked not to have that fruit is because the person who's asked you not to have of that fruit recognizes that if you do have that fruit, you will become like him. recognizing good from evil, and having wisdom. I do not take issue with the desire for more. I take issue with the failure to recognize that they already were what they desired. This is key. Many of you are looking for success without recognizing that you are already what you desire. Your season hasn't come yet. And any emotion that takes you away from staying in integrity with the plan puts you in a position whereby you're using a different methodology to get to the same result, but it's a counterfeit, which would mean that it will not be long lasting. It might be short and ephemeral. It might be exciting when it comes, but it hasn't come from the right source and it has not come at the right time. There is a season to sow, there is a season to reap. You cannot do both in the same season. You cannot do both at the same time. And here is perhaps the most important part. Sometimes you do not sow where you reap. You do not reap where you sow. You sow in one soil and the blessing comes from another soil. So for most people in the Garden of Eden, the failure was not in objectifying the apple or the fruit. It was in the split second where both parties felt that there was something denied of them at the foundation which they lacked, which they recognized that they desired. Now, this goes back to what I started with when I said envy doesn't begin with the objectification of something external. It usually begins with a resentment, a feeling that you've been denied of something that should be your birthright. The Garden of Eden, the first. Second, Cain and Abel, two brothers. They both make a sacrifice. One is downcast and the other is elated. Why? Because his sacrifice has been accepted. But the voice comes down and says to the one who is downcast, be careful. There's an emotion knocking on your door, clouding your judgment. But if you master that emotion, which is in this particular case envy, jealousy, don't be jealous of your brother, don't be envious of your brother. If you master your emotions, what you seek is within you. In other words, get back in alignment with who you are. Recognize that there is nothing outside that can make you better than what you are on the inside. The inside is what counts. Your success is inbuilt. Most of us are pursuing success. You don't chase after success. You attract success in a tangible form. Why? Because you're built to be successful. Many years ago, someone said, Jim Rohn, Earl Shove, who was a mentor to Jim Rohn, said, why don't you set a goal to be a millionaire? Earl Shove said this to Jim Rohn. And Jim Rohn was excited by the opportunity to be a millionaire. But he said, not for the money, not for the wealth, but for what it would make of you to achieve it. Powerful word. For what it would make of you to achieve it. In other words, draw out the potential you have in you, and then you will attract success. You don't pursue success. That's the wrong goal. You attract success. Cain and Abel, two brothers. One killed the other. Cain killed his brother Abel because he was too envious. He could not contain the negative emotion of jealousy and envy. Number 3, Rachel and Leah, two sisters. Fascinating story. It's funny how sometimes what we think are blessings. For example, you have Rachel, who's very gorgeous, attractive, beautiful, and Leah, who's not quite as attractive as a younger sister. Both married to the same man, Jacob, loving Rachel much more than he did Leah. But the way the universe works, Leah being more fruitful in producing and Rachel being barren. And what we find in these two stories is this envy that exists. Not by one party, but by both. Rachel thinks, well, if I give him another son, my husband another son, then finally I will be loved. And Rachel thinking, well, if only I can have one child, finally my husband will see the value in me. Both parties look into each other envious of what either has, not recognizing the beauty that lies within and the fact that they were successful and all they had to do was wait for the season. We take a jump again. Saul and David. At the time, King Saul and David. David the wanderer, David the shepherd. But this envy in Saul, who is the king, towards this young boy, who he recognizes has been anointed to be the next king, but a strong level of resentment, an envious spirit, seeing that there's a hand with David, and not recognizing that there was a hand with Saul. And his pathway and his path was very different. It was never supposed to be like King David. He was supposed to be King Saul. But this drove him so many times to try to kill David. Interesting. So much so that Saul's son, Jonathan, was David's best friend and loved David. Jonathan was happy to step aside. Jonathan was the heir to the throne. David had been the appointed king. If you think about it, it would have been in Jonathan's best interest to have his father kill David so that he could become king. But no, he loved David so much, and he could see the hand of God with David, and he could see David's uniqueness, that he was happy to be alongside David's success and not have envy or jealousy, but to be content in who he was. Now, the reason I've connected Jonathan into the story is that you can understand, and here is a question: can you be happy for other people's success without being envious or jealous, or without desiring what they have? Jonathan never desired what David had. He was content. He was content, and so content he was happy to give his life for David. Now, fast forward. We keep David in the picture, but we bring in David's son, Absalom. Absalom was envious of his father's notoriety, the respect people had for his father, that he wanted to be king. So much so he actually tried, attempted to overthrow his father as king, and even kill his father, so that he could become king. Again, envy. He could not stand people coming to David for wisdom, for judgment, and for rulership. So much so he set up camp to divert people who would normally come to his father to ask him questions, and says, well, my father does not care about you. Come to me, I love you, the people. Tell me your problems and I will solve the problems. And so what he did, he diverted what was a positive flow of energy from his father towards him. And that created a very strong emotional desire that went beyond envy, to the point where he thought he could depose an anointed king, his father. And if it meant killing his father, he would have, just so that he could have what his father had. Fascinating stories. See, David and Absalom is an important story that you can see that sometimes when we talk about envy, jealousy, it's not just between one person and a stranger. It occurs within loved ones. Leah and Rachel, two sisters. Cain and Abel, two brothers. David and Absalom, a father and a son. Every time there's been envy, without exception, it always ends badly. And this is partly why it is very important for you to have an emotion that is pure, an emotion that does not have any form of envy, so that you remove all obstacles that could be in your way. I have met friends, I've known people, acquaintances, who were always motivated by the desire for more. They could not be satiated. They were insatiable, but the motivation was not because they did not have enough. It was because they did not want to have less than the person next door. You have to, if you are going to be successful over the long term, in any area of life, you have to get rid of envy, jealousy. And a litmus test is a simple one. Whether you can be happy for that neighbor of yours, that brother of yours, that friend of yours, that cousin of yours, that person next door who is not as smart as you are, who is not as intelligent, educated, good looking, has nothing on you, but seems to find success in some weird form. Could you be happy for someone else's success? without it feeling as though you're chewing on stones. Because if you can be happy for other people's success, and you can be happy in their success with them, then it means that your energy is not diverted and you're never comparing yourself. Now, I'm giving you a few stories. Let me conclude with one, and I'm traveling forward. The prodigal son. Perhaps, in my opinion, one of the most important parables, stories, because it teaches us so much about ourselves. Two sons, one father. One decides, I've had enough of you, father. Split the inheritance into two. Give me my half. I want to go off to another nation, and I want to be an adult. And the father says, fine, having tried to persuade his son not to do as he wanted to do. And eventually he failed in his attempts to convince his younger son to remain. Parted ways with his son, gave him all the wealth that was his by virtue of his inheritance. And what do we have? Many years later, the son comes back, squandered all the money in a very poor state health-wise, but returns to his father and asks for forgiveness. As a matter of fact, returns and asks to be considered to be a servant of his father because he was doing so poorly. He said, well, my father's servants at least have meals to eat, and they're well looked after, and they have a roof over their heads. I will return to my father and ask for his forgiveness, and I will ask my father to let me be his servant so that I may have something to eat. Beautiful story about the love of a father and the humility of the son, recognizing you can always ask for help. You can always ask for forgiveness, and you can always ask to be allowed to come back into the fold. And on his return, his father sees him, embraces him. The father is delighted. He's regained a son. They throw a banquet, celebrating, and his older brother returns. But here's the key part of the whole thing. At the moment the older brother realizes that there is a celebration in the house, having been out and having been the loyal son. This is a key part of today's session. The older brother stayed with the father, remained loyal, never asked for anything, was dedicated to the father, was humble, was always there with his father. And for some reason, on this particular day, he hears that there's been a celebration back home. And he says, what is the celebration? And the servant says, one of the servants say, your long lost brother has returned, and your father has killed the fattened cow, and we're celebrating your brother's return because your father thought your brother had died. Envy. The emotion creeps in, jealousy. And he's not happy. Why? Because he feels that he has been loyal and he's worked hard and he's been diligent and he did not squander half the inheritance. And his father has never given him a calf or given him a cow to celebrate with his friends. But here, the brother that squandered half the inheritance has returned, and the father is throwing a lavish party for him. And the father said to him something that I think has been one of the most profound parts of stories and archetypes and parables and whether you believe or you think it's fiction, doesn't matter. But a powerful thing that resonates with most people, myself included, which is, you always have me, son. What is mine is yours. The key word is abundance. Abundance. You have to have the abundance mindset. The mindset that does not think that if someone has something, then that precludes you from having it also. The father said to this older son, what is mine is yours. Remember what I said. There's a frustration that comes to each and every one of us. There's a sense of bitterness. It's not about objectifying. He was not necessarily frustrated with the fact that they were celebrating and using some of the resources. He had a resentment because he felt that the same position had not been bestowed upon him. For some reason, he was considered not to be deserving of the same love and blessing. What he did not understand or see was that the inheritance was also his. What the father had, he also owned by virtue of being the heir to the throne, or the first son. Now, let me bring today's session to a close by saying as follows. Envy, jealousy is a powerful emotion. Before you start your success journey, audit yourself. And along the journey, continually audit yourself. The reason is simple. A chain of habits are too light to be felt until they become too heavy to be broken. Envy begins as a habit. It's very subtle. Envy can be too light to be felt initially until they become too heavy to be broken. It's very hard to know when you become envious. Very hard. But I'll say this, there's a feeling of being light as you travel, and being content, and being at peace. Remember the words, not my will, but yours, O Lord. Meaning, if you cannot accept the hand you've been dealt in life, and you cannot find peace in those hands, or cannot find grace in what you've been given, in the cross you've been given, or the cross that has been put on your shoulders, if you do not find peace in that journey, then it means you will always have envy as a motivation. And that envy would always, without exception, lead you down a path. I hope it doesn't, but when it leads you down that path, if unchecked and uncorrected, it could cause more harm and more damage than you could ever imagine. Now, I hope today's session has been useful. Let me say this as I close today's session. I hope, for some reason, I wasn't able to be around in the last week. It is my hope that with this session I can get back to the regular schedule of providing ideas and inspirations and insights and thought processes and questions in order to help you achieve success. As a man, you have a masculine burden of performance. Whatever that performance might be, whatever that burden might be, as you journey on the pathway towards your success, just make sure that you do not have, as one of your motivating factors, the spirit of envy or the spirit of jealousy. Now, I wish you all the best.